In CSS3, we have a property called position that specifies the position of the element where the element should be appear in the web page. For example, this is your web page and we have an element. Whether the element should be appear in its own position or should be displayed in appropriate position based on the x and y coordinates. So this position of the element will be decided by using position property. In the position property, we have four possible options, that is static, absolute, fixed, relative and sticky, totally 5 options. The default value is static. It means the element appears in its normal position, means the default position. That means in the web page, by default elements appear either line by line or side by side, one after another. If it is a block level element, it occupies 100% of the width, so the element appears line by line like this. But in case if the elements are inline elements, they doesn't occupy 100% of the width, so the inline elements appear side by side. So because of static, the elements appear in its normal position or default position. So manually you need not set position equal to static because it is default. But sometimes you need to set position absolute, fixed, relative and sticky manually. What is the meaning of position absolute? When you mention position absolute, you can specify x and y coordinates by using left and top properties of CSS3 so that the element appears in its x and y coordinates based on the left and top property values. For example, this is your element. The distance between the left margin and the element is called as x-axis, that is called left property. And the distance between vertical margin and the element is called as top property, that is y-axis. So the left property contains the number of pixels, that is from the left margin of the page to the element. That is the number of pixels in this area. And the top property contains distance from the top, that is number of pixels from the top margin. So based on the mentioned x and y coordinates, the element should be appear. In that case, you will use absolute. For regular elements such as paragraphs or div tags, you will not set position absolute. But when you want to display the element in its fixed position based on the x and y coordinates, in that case only you will use position absolute. We will see that example later in this lecture. Similarly, we have something called fixed and relative also. The fixed value is almost equivalent to absolute, but the difference is the fixed elements will not be scrolled, but absolute elements will be scrolled when you use the scroll bar of the page, that is when you scroll the page top to bottom or left to right. But fixed elements will be always fixed in its x and y coordinates, but doesn't move when you scroll the page up and down. And in case of relative, the x and y coordinates will be calculated from the parent element instead of calculating from the page left margin and page top margin. Let me demonstrate all these property variations practically. So I just open the home.html file. In this page, we have something called a navigation bar that appears at the page top. Now, I would like to make it always stick to the top when you scroll the page up and down. See, when you scroll the page up and down, the scroll bar just moves up I would like to make it stick to the top of the page. So I just select the navigation bar in the CSS file. So in the styles.css file, I am selecting the nav bar and set position absolute and also specify left 0 pixels and the top 0 pixels. So whenever the position is static, which is the default, you cannot use the left and top properties. Even though you mention left and top properties, that doesn't get affected. But as soon as the position is other than static, either it is absolute, relative or fixed, you can use the left and top properties to specify x and y coordinates. The top property specifies the y coordinate and the left property specifies the x coordinate. That is, for example, this is your web page and we have an element here, and this distance from the left margin is called as x-axis and this vertical distance is called as y-axis. That is left and top properties respectively. But in this case, we have mentioned both left and top as 0 pixels. That means the element would have been appear at the top left corner starting from here. And since the navbar width is 100%, it occupies 100% width of the web page. So that means the navigation bar always stick to top of the page. So as you can see, the width has been disturbed for the navigation bar. So let us set up the width, that is 100%, so that the navigation bar occupies 100% of the width. But you can see two problems here. That is, when you scroll the page up and down, the navigation bar is getting moved. And at the same time, the content, that is welcome to India tourism, gone to backside of the navigation bar, which we don't expect. It is the default nature of the absolute. So instead of absolute, if you are using sticky, the first problem has been solved here. That is, when you scroll the page up and down, always the navigation bar stick to top of the page. So it always rendered based on left and top coordinates, that is x and y coordinates. And the second problem also I think solved. Now the heading has been moved down. That means the content area of the heading starts from here instead of starting from the top of the page from here. Previously, the heading was displayed in this area, but now the heading is started from here. So that is the reason heading doesn't go back to the back of the navigation bar. So for the navigation bar, sticky is the good option. So if sticky is better, when we use position fixed, let me create a footer box so that we can understand position fixed. I switch to home.html file. After the navigation bar, I would like to add a div tag with some content, for example, all rights reserved. And because of ampersand copy semicolon, you will get a copyright symbol. You can see a div tag here, but I would like to make this div tag appears at the bottom of the page always. In that case, we can use position fixed. So let's apply a CSS class for the same, that is copyrights, and select this div tag in the CSS file, that is after navigation bar. Let's select that copyrights div tag and apply some background color and then text color. And also I would like to make it transparent, that is opacity can be 0 to 1. For example, I set 0.6, that means 60% visible, 40% transparent. So you can see the transparent color and the transparent text because opacity equal to 0.6. The opacity property specifies the transparency behavior of the element, where opacity 0 means 100% transparent, means it is completely invisible, and opacity 1 means it is not at all transparent, it is normally visible. So any value that is between 0 to 1 makes the element transparent. So as of now it looks like this. And now I would like to make it positioned at the bottom of the page. So I would like to specify position as absolute. And then we can use the left and top properties. Left is 0 pixels. And the top is, for example, 300 pixels. So it calculates the left and top properties now. As of now it is displayed here because the distance between the top of the page till the element is top property. This is 300 pixels now. And the left is 0, that's why it is displayed left element. And now let's make it 95 VH, that is viewport height. As I have explained earlier, we can use various units, that is pixels, percentages, VW and VH. Here VH means viewport height, that is 1% of the page height. So we are using 95% of the viewport height, that is displayed here. That means almost at the bottom of the page. And then let me add width property, that is for example 400 pixels. And then left property, that is for example 300 pixels. So it is displayed here. Let's move a little bit. For example, left is 400 pixels and width is 300. Let me add text align center. So it is displayed here. Left is 500 pixels. Alright. Now it is almost center of the page horizontally. But here, because of position absolute, we have a problem. That is, when you scroll the page up and down, it moves up. So I would like to make it always stick to that position. It should not move across the page. So for that case, instead of position absolute, we can make it position fixed. In this case, it always stick to that position based on left and top properties. It doesn't participate in the scroll bar. So when you scroll the page up and down, it doesn't scroll up or down. And now finally let me demonstrate position relative. Now switch to home.html file. Let me clear all this content because it is no longer required for me. So I just clean up the complete body tag. We have only the navigation bar and then the copyright div tag. Here I would like to make a set of div tags with class equal to box. So we have 4 div tags with class equal to box. They by default appear line by line like this. Now I would like to apply some styles for the same. So delete the unnecessary CSS code that is written above. Now switch to the CSS file, that is styles.css file. Apply some style for the box. So because of width, height and float, they appear side by side. Let me add background color for the same. Alright, this is our element now. Let me increase the height. Now, in this box, I would like to create a child div tag so that we can set position relative for the same. So I switch back to home.html. Inside the div tag of USA, let me add another div tag. So I just try to add Washington. So it is displayed like this. Now I would like to apply position relative for this. So let me add the CSS class called capital. Let me select the same in the CSS file. Let's set background color. And let's remove the padding for the parent. So by default, the element appear like this. Now let me set width and height for the same. So I would like to set position relative for this Washington. So position relative so that we can set left and top properties, that is X and Y coordinates. The distance from the top margin is, for example, 30 pixels. Otherwise make it 80 pixels. So remember, top is 80 pixels and the position is relative. That means it displays from the top 80 pixels that is calculated from the parent instead of calculating from the top margin of the page. See, exactly in the same situation, instead of using position relative, if you switch to absolute, the top and left properties are calculated from the top margin of the page and the left margin of the page. So that is the reason the element appears here, that is 80 pixels from the top margin of the page. We don't want that, right? We would like to calculate left and top properties from its parent instead of calculating from the top margin or left margin of the page. So that is the reason exactly we have to set position relative. So what you can understand from this is, position relative is almost the same as position absolute, but the big difference is, in case of position absolute, the left and top properties are calculated from the top margin of the page and left margin of the page. But in case of position relative, the X and Y coordinates, that is top and left coordinates, will be calculated from its parent element instead of calculating left and top from the top margin of the page and the left margin of the page. That is the only big difference between absolute and relative. Now the element is here, that is 80 pixels from the top margin of the parent element. So let me add left, that is for example 40 pixels, that is displayed here. Means this distance is 40 pixels from the parent and this is 80 pixels from its parent. So we have understood absolute, relative, fixed and sticky. And if you don't set any position property, by default it is position static. That means the element appears one after another. So when we use which one? In case of navigation bar example, sticky is better. But in case if you would like to display ads or any other footer information or any kind of offer that should be appear always at certain place in the page, then you will use position fixed. But you would like to make it appears within the same parent element instead of getting out of the parent, then you will use position relative. Something like placing a button at specific place within the same parent. But we can use the position absolute for the submenus for the navigation bar or sidebar. This is all about position property in CSS3.